There is a place in the American West that looks, at first glance, like a postcard. Tourists arrive by the millions every year. They park their cars, step out onto wooden boardwalks, take photographs of geysers and hot springs and bison crossing the road in lazy single file. They buy souvenirs. They drive back out. Most of them never realize what is actually happening around them, because Yellowstone is not a park. It is an ecosystem so old, so violent, and so finely balanced that scientists still do not fully understand it. Beneath the ground, a supervolcano stirs. Above it, predators move through forests and valleys in patterns that have barely changed since the last ice age. And in the space between the two, between the fire underground and the hunters above, plays out one of the most complex survival dramas on the entire planet. The wolves that were wiped out and came back. The bears that can smell death from 20 miles away. The mountain lion that walks through crowds of people without a single person knowing it was there. This is not the Yellowstone you have seen before. Before we go further, if you are the kind of person who watches a documentary like this to the end, you are exactly who Doc Wild 4K was made for. Hit that subscribe button right now and turn on the bell. Every week we go somewhere most cameras never reach. You don't want to miss what's coming. And drop a comment below telling us where in the world you're watching from today. We read every single one. Now, let's go in. To understand why Yellowstone produces the predators it does, you first have to understand what Yellowstone actually is. It sits in the northwest corner of Wyoming, spilling slightly into Montana and Idaho. On a map, it is a rough rectangle about 60 miles wide and 54 miles tall. In area, it covers more than 2.2 million acres, larger than the states of Rhode Island and Delaware combined. If you drove around its outer boundary without stopping, it would take you the better part of a day. But the size is almost beside the point. What makes Yellowstone unlike any other place in North America is what lies beneath it. Roughly 45 miles below the surface sits one of the largest volcanic hotspots on Earth. The magma chamber beneath Yellowstone is estimated to be about 55 miles long, 20 miles wide, and in some places nearly 10 miles deep. It contains enough molten rock to fill the Grand Canyon more than 11 times over. The ground above it breathes. It rises and falls by inches every year as the magma shifts. In some spots, the soil temperature just below the surface reaches 200 degrees Fahrenheit. This is why Yellowstone has more than 10,000 geothermal features. Geysers, hot springs, mud pots, fumaroles, more than anywhere else on Earth. The famous Old Faithful geyser erupts roughly every 90 minutes, sending a column of boiling water more than 100 feet into the air. The Grand Prismatic Spring, the largest hot spring in the United States, is so hot at its center that almost nothing can live there. The vivid rings of color around its edges, orange, yellow, green, are not minerals. They are living mats of heat-resistant bacteria, among the most ancient forms of life on the planet. The park sits on a high plateau, most of it above 7,000 feet in elevation. Winters here are not merely cold, they are a sustained assault. Temperatures regularly drop to minus 20 Fahrenheit. In January, the wind chill can push that to minus 60. Snow accumulates to depths of 10 or 12 feet in the backcountry. The plateau becomes, for months at a time, a white world where the only sounds are wind, the creak of frozen trees, and the distant call of a raven. And yet, every animal that lives here year-round has found a way not just to survive this, but to use it. The rivers that cut through Yellowstone, the Yellowstone River, the Fire Hole, the Madison, the Lamar, are fed partly by snowmelt and partly by geothermal water. Some stretches never freeze, even in the deepest winter, because warm water seeps up from below. These open stretches become lifelines. They are where elk and bison gather when the snow is too deep to move, where wolves and mountain lions wait. The landscape is not uniform. Drive from one end of the park to the other, and you pass through half a dozen distinct worlds. Dense lodgepole pine forests so thick the sun barely reaches the ground. Open sagebrush valleys where you can see for 10 miles in every direction. Riverside meadows, lush and green in summer, buried under 4 feet of snow in February. Rocky ridge lines where thermal vents keep patches of ground bare all year. The Lamar Valley in the park's northeast corner, wide, golden, threaded by a clear river, is so consistently rich in wildlife that it has been called the American Serengeti. Each of these landscapes shelters different animals. Each creates different rules for survival. And over all of it, the geysers, the valleys, the frozen forests, the open meadows, move the predators. Before we reach the apex, the chain has to be built from the bottom. The coyote is the most visible predator in Yellowstone and the most underestimated. It is everywhere, in the open valleys, along the roadsides, at the edges of the geothermal basins. Tourists see it constantly and mistake it for a small dog, a stray, something ordinary. There is nothing ordinary about it. The coyote, Canis latrans, literally barking dog, is one of the most adaptable predators in North America. It is the only large carnivore that has expanded its range since European settlement, moving into cities, suburbs, farmland, forests, all while being actively hunted and poisoned for more than a century. In Yellowstone, where hunting is prohibited, coyotes reach their natural density, forming packs of 5 to 7 animals that hold and defend territories of up to 15 square miles. Their primary prey in winter is the vole, a small rodent that lives beneath the snow in a network of tunnels. The coyote hunts it the same way a fox does. It stands still on the snow, head tilted, listening with ears so sensitive they can detect the movement of a single animal tunneling through frozen ground 6 inches below. When the sound is located, the coyote launches straight up, arcs through the air, and plunges nose first through the snow crust to pin the vole beneath its muzzle. The success rate on these hunts is remarkably high. A healthy coyote can eat dozens of voles in a single day. But coyotes are also opportunists. They follow bison herds, waiting for an animal to collapse. They shadow larger predators, wolves, bears, mountain lions, at a careful distance, darting in to steal scraps when the apex predator moves off the kill. In the Lamar Valley in winter, it is common to see a dozen coyotes orbiting a wolf pack's kill, dancing at the edges of the wolves' tolerance, grabbing what they can before being chased off. When the wolves were absent from Yellowstone, from their extermination in the 1920s until their reintroduction in 1995, coyote populations exploded. Packs grew larger, territories expanded, and populations of smaller prey animals like pronghorn fawns and ground-nesting birds collapsed. The moment the wolves returned, coyote numbers dropped by more than 50%. Not because the wolves killed vast numbers of coyotes, though they did kill some, but because the presence of a larger predator reorganized the landscape of fear. Coyotes avoided areas where wolves were active. This freed up vast stretches of the park where smaller animals could once again recover. That is the kind of cascading effect that makes Yellowstone one of the most studied ecosystems on Earth. Moving up the chain and staying mostly invisible is the American badger. The badger is built like a piece of construction equipment, low to the ground, massively muscled through the shoulders, with claws on its front feet that can be 2 inches long and designed for one purpose: digging. A badger can excavate a burrow faster than a person with a shovel. It hunts ground squirrels and pocket gophers by simply tearing open their burrows from above, moving through the soil so quickly that the rodent inside has almost no time to escape. The badger's other trick is a partnership that has been documented repeatedly in Yellowstone and throughout the American West. It hunts alongside coyotes. The badger digs down after a ground squirrel. The squirrel bolts through a side exit. The coyote, waiting above ground, catches it on the run. The two animals seem to have no formal arrangement. They simply recognize that hunting together produces better results than hunting alone. When there is a kill, the coyote usually takes the prey. The badger seems unconcerned. It will find the next burrow. The osprey arrives in spring and belongs entirely to the water. It is not a large bird, roughly the same wingspan as a red-tailed hawk, but it is specialized for a single task so completely that it seems almost engineered rather than evolved. The osprey hunts fish and only fish, and it does it by diving feet first from heights of up to 130 feet, hitting the water at 40 miles per hour, and seizing a trout in talons that are covered in tiny backward-facing spines to grip wet, thrashing prey. Its outer toe is reversible, allowing it to carry fish head first through the air to reduce drag. Its nostrils close during the dive to keep out water. Its plumage is denser and more water-resistant than most raptors. The rivers of Yellowstone, cold, clear, full of cutthroat trout, are ideal osprey habitat. They nest on the tops of dead trees near water, returning to the same nest year after year, adding sticks until the structure can weigh several hundred pounds. A nesting pair will catch and deliver several fish per day to their chicks during the breeding season, diving and striking with a precision that makes it look effortless. It is not effortless. Studies show that ospreys miss their target on roughly 30% of dives. But 70% is an extraordinary success rate for a hunter operating in a completely different medium than the one it lives in, diving from air into water to catch an animal that is built to evade exactly this kind of attack. There is a predator in Yellowstone that most visitors never see. Not because it is rare, because it does not want to be seen. The mountain lion, also called the cougar, puma, or panther depending on where you are in the Americas, is the most widely distributed large land predator in the Western Hemisphere. It ranges from the Yukon to Patagonia. It has been documented walking through the suburbs of Los Angeles, crossing highways in New Jersey, moving silently through the wooded edges of cities of millions of people without a single resident knowing it was there. In Yellowstone, mountain lions live primarily in the rocky terrain of the northern range, the area around the Gardner River Canyon, the cliffs of the Yellowstone River, the steep ridges above the Lamar Valley. They are almost never seen by tourists. Research biologists who have spent careers studying them have gone months without a direct sighting. The lion's entire hunting strategy is built around not being perceived. An adult male mountain lion in Yellowstone weighs between 140 and 180 pounds. Its body is long, low, and extraordinarily flexible. The spine can bend in ways that allow it to compress into tight spaces and to generate explosive bursts of speed from a standing start. It can leap 15 feet vertically from a standstill and cover 40 feet in a single horizontal bound. Its paws are enormous relative to its body, functioning as shock absorbers during jumps from rocky outcroppings. It hunts elk. Almost exclusively elk in Yellowstone, though it will take deer, bighorn sheep, and occasionally porcupines when elk are unavailable. The hunt is an exercise in patience and geometry. The mountain lion does not chase. It maneuvers. It reads the terrain, identifies a position above its target, and closes the distance using every available piece of cover. A boulder, a fold in the hillside, a shadow, until it is within 30 to 50 feet. Then it launches. The kill is made with a bite to the back of the neck or the base of the skull, delivered with enough force to sever the spinal cord or crush the vertebrae. Death is almost instantaneous. The lion then drags the carcass, which may weigh 500 pounds or more, to a sheltered location, covers it with leaves and debris, and feeds from it over several days, returning repeatedly, always alert for the bears and wolves that will steal the kill if they find it. What makes the mountain lion scientifically fascinating is its relationship with fear. Research in Yellowstone and throughout the American West has shown that elk respond to the presence of mountain lions in ways that go far beyond simply fleeing when a lion appears. Elk that live in mountain lion country change their behavior throughout their daily lives. They spend less time in dense forest. They move through risky terrain more quickly. They remain in larger groups. These behavioral changes, driven purely by the threat of predation rather than actual predation events, alter the way those elk graze. And changes in grazing patterns change the vegetation. And changes in vegetation change the landscape. The lion shapes the land without touching most of the animals in it. It does this through fear alone. If the mountain lion is the ghost of Yellowstone, the grizzly bear is its undeniable presence. Two species of bear live in Yellowstone, the black bear and the grizzly. The black bear is common throughout North America's forests, adaptable and generally non-confrontational, a generalist that eats whatever is available. In Yellowstone, it is the background character, present, visible from roadsides, doing what it does without much drama. The grizzly is something else. An adult male grizzly in Yellowstone weighs between 400 and 700 pounds, though some large individuals have been documented above 800. The shoulder hump, a mass of muscle that distinguishes the grizzly from the black bear at a distance, powers the forelimbs, which are the bear's primary tools. The claws on a grizzly's front paws can reach 4 inches in length. They are not retractable. The bear walks on them constantly, and they wear down slowly over a lifetime. Grizzlies in Yellowstone are omnivores in the truest sense. Their diet across a single year is staggering in its diversity. In early spring, when they emerge from their dens after 5 to 7 months of torpor, they eat almost anything. Winter-killed elk carcasses, roots, early grasses, the inner bark of trees. As spring progresses, they dig for army cutworm moths, whitebark pine nuts, and ground squirrels. They wade into rivers to catch cutthroat trout during the spawning runs. In summer, they consume enormous quantities of berries, huckleberries, serviceberries, buffalo berries, moving methodically through berry patches and stripping bushes with their lips. In fall, in the period called hyperphagia, a grizzly may eat 20,000 calories per day for weeks on end, building the fat reserves that will sustain it through winter. Grizzlies in Yellowstone also hunt elk, not as frequently as wolves or mountain lions, but opportunistically and with considerable effectiveness. A bear that stumbles on an elk calf in the first weeks after birth, when the calf cannot yet outrun a predator, will kill and eat it with no hesitation. Bears follow wolf packs during hunting season, tracking the sounds of a hunt or the ravens that gather above a kill and arrive at the carcass to drive the wolves off. A single large bear can displace an entire pack from a kill. The wolves circle and protest, but rarely challenge a grizzly directly. There is one behavioral trait of the Yellowstone grizzly that researchers have found particularly striking. These bears have among the largest documented home ranges of any grizzly population in North America. A single adult male may roam over 1,000 square miles across the course of a year, moving through the park, across its boundaries, into national forests and wilderness areas beyond. They know their territory in extraordinary detail, remembering the locations of specific food sources across years, returning to the same berry patches in the same weeks of the same months, tracking the movements of elk herds, knowing where to find carrion in specific conditions. This spatial intelligence, the map that exists inside a grizzly bear's mind, is one of the things that make them so difficult to manage when they come into conflict with people outside the park's boundaries. The bear is not wandering randomly. It is moving through a landscape it has memorized, following routes it has used for years, going exactly where it has learned to go. The Yellowstone grizzly population was listed as threatened under the Endangered Species Act in 1975, when fewer than 150 individuals remained in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. Conservation efforts over the following decades, habitat protection, conflict reduction, strict management of garbage and attractants, allowed the population to recover. By the 2020s, the greater Yellowstone grizzly population had grown to an estimated 700 to 1,000 individuals. The recovery is one of the genuine success stories of American conservation. It is also incomplete. The bear's primary food source, the whitebark pine, is under severe pressure from a combination of blister rust disease and mountain pine beetle, both of which are spreading faster as temperatures rise. The high-altitude groves where whitebark pine grows are warming at twice the rate of lower elevations. As the trees die, a major calorie source disappears, and bears are forced to range farther and lower into more frequent contact with people. The grizzly survived the 20th century. What the 21st century holds is less certain. No predator exists without prey. And in Yellowstone, the prey animals are not passive victims. They are the architects of the landscape, and understanding them is essential to understanding everything else. The American bison is the largest land animal in North America. An adult bull can weigh over 2,000 pounds and stand 6 feet at the shoulder. Yellowstone holds the largest wild bison population in the United States, roughly 5,000 to 6,000 animals, the only herd in the country that has lived continuously in the wild since prehistoric times. Every other wild bison population was wiped out in the Great Slaughter of the 19th century and later reconstituted from captive stock. Yellowstone's bison are the real thing, genetically continuous with the animals that roamed the Great Plains in herds of tens of millions. Watching a bison herd move through the Lamar Valley in winter is like watching something from another era. They move in loose groups, their massive heads swinging from side to side as they sweep snow away from the grass beneath. Their coats, shaggy and dark, collect frost and ice without any apparent effect on the animal underneath. At -20, a bison can stand still in an open field for hours, its metabolic rate dropping just enough to conserve energy, its thick hide and the insulating air pockets in its wool-like coat keeping core temperature stable. Their relationship with wolves is ancient and precisely tuned. A healthy adult bison is nearly untouchable by a wolf pack. The animal is simply too large, too strong, and too well defended. What wolves hunt are the old, the sick, the injured, and the very young. To take even a compromised bison, a pack may follow and harass it for hours, testing for weakness, waiting for the animal to slow or stumble. The bison knows this. When wolves approach a herd, the animals close ranks, calves moving to the center, the larger animals forming a wall. This defensive formation is so effective that wolves often abandon the attempt entirely and move on. The elk is the wolf's preferred prey in Yellowstone, and possibly the animal whose behavior has been most dramatically reshaped by predation pressure. Elk, Cervus canadensis, are large deer, second in size only to moose in North America. An adult bull in the fall, at peak condition, weighs between 600 and 1,000 pounds and carries an antler rack that can span 5 feet. They are built for endurance rather than burst speed, capable of maintaining a trot for miles. In summer, Yellowstone's elk graze the high meadows. In winter, they move to lower elevations, where the snow is shallower and food more accessible. Before the wolves returned, Yellowstone's elk herds were large and relatively fearless. They grazed heavily along riverbanks, keeping vegetation cropped short, preventing trees and shrubs from establishing. Rivers were wide and relatively featureless because the vegetation that stabilizes banks and creates the complex structure that fish and birds need was constantly being eaten. The wolves changed this, not just by killing elk, but by altering where elk chose to be. Elk avoided the valleys and riverbanks where wolves could approach without being seen. They moved to higher, more open terrain where they could see threats from a distance. The riverbanks, no longer heavily grazed, began to recover. Willows and aspens grew back. Beavers, which need willows, returned to rivers where they had been absent for decades. Their dams created ponds and wetlands. The water table rose. Songbird populations increased in the riparian vegetation. This sequence of effects, wolf to elk to vegetation to river to beaver to wetland to songbird, is one of the most dramatic examples of a trophic cascade ever documented in a natural system. The wolves did not just change the animals, they changed the rivers. The pronghorn is the third major grazer of the Yellowstone ecosystem, and the most extraordinary in purely physical terms. It is the fastest land animal in the Western Hemisphere, capable of sustained speeds above 55 miles per hour and sprint speeds touching 60. Only the cheetah is faster, and the cheetah cannot maintain its top speed for more than a few hundred yards. The pronghorn can run at 45 miles per hour for miles without stopping. This speed is, in the current ecosystem, a form of over-engineering. Nothing in Yellowstone can catch a healthy pronghorn at full speed. But the pronghorn did not evolve alongside the predators that currently inhabit the park. It evolved alongside the American cheetah, the American lion, the dire wolf, predators that have been extinct for more than 10,000 years. The pronghorn is running from ghosts. Its legs, its heart, its extraordinary lung capacity, all of it calibrated for a race against predators that no longer exist. It is one of nature's more poignant details, the fastest animal in North America, built for a world that disappeared before the first human set foot on this continent. In 1926, the last wolf in Yellowstone was killed by a park ranger. For nearly 70 years, the park existed without them. Elk herds grew. Vegetation changed. The ecosystem reorganized itself around the absence of its apex predator. In January 1995, wildlife managers loaded wolves into crates in Canada, transported them south, and released them into the Lamar Valley. 14 wolves. That was the beginning. By the mid-2020s, the Yellowstone wolf population had grown to roughly 100 animals organized into 10 packs. The Lamar Canyon Pack, the Junction Butte Pack, the Wapiti Lake Pack. Each holds a territory. Each has a history that park researchers have tracked for decades, following individual animals by radio collar, by camera trap, by direct observation from the ridges above the valley. The wolves of Yellowstone are the most intensively studied wild wolf population in the world. A Yellowstone wolf pack is a family. At its core is a breeding pair, the male and female who produce the pups each spring. Around them are their offspring from previous years, yearlings and 2-year-olds and older animals who help hunt, help defend the territory, and help raise the new pups. Pack size in Yellowstone typically runs between 5 and 12 animals, though some packs have grown temporarily larger. The wolf's hunting strategy is built on reading the landscape and reading the prey. When a pack locates an elk herd, the wolves do not immediately attack. They watch, they test. Individual wolves move towards the herd, reading the responses of individual animals. Which ones bolt immediately? Which ones hold their ground? Which ones seem to favor one leg? Which ones move slightly slower than the rest? This assessment can take minutes or hours. When they select a target and commit, the chase is fast and exhausting for both sides. Elk can sustain speeds that match or exceed the wolves' top pace. The wolves' advantage is endurance and coordination. They relay, fresh animals taking over from tired ones, the pack working as a unit to cut off escape routes, to turn the elk toward terrain that slows it or traps it. In deep snow, the wolves' compact paws distribute their weight more effectively than the elk's narrow hooves. On flat ground in light snow, the elk often escape. Kills happen on perhaps 20 to 30% of chases. For a pack hunting in winter, this means long stretches of failure and hunger punctuated by successful kills that feed the entire group for several days. The communication within a pack during a hunt is largely non-vocal. Howling is used for long-distance coordination and territory marking. But during the stalk and chase, the wolves move in near silence, responding to each other's movements with a precision that suggests something close to tactical awareness. Researchers who have observed hundreds of hunts in Yellowstone describe a quality of mutual attention between pack members during a chase that goes well beyond simple herd behavior. Individual wolves seem to respond to what other individuals are doing. adjusting their own position in real time. After 30 years, the evidence of what the wolves have done to Yellowstone's ecosystem is extensive and still being cataloged. Elk numbers in the northern range dropped significantly in the decade after wolf reintroduction, from roughly 17,000 animals to fewer than 8,000. Critics of wolf reintroduction pointed to this decline as evidence of damage. Supporters pointed to the recovering vegetation, the returning beaver populations, the changing behavior of elk that had redistributed their grazing pressure across the landscape. The truth, as with most ecological questions, is complicated. The wolf is not a simple solution. It is a factor, a powerful, cascading, landscape-level factor in a system of extraordinary complexity. What is beyond argument is this: the return of the wolves made Yellowstone more fully itself. The ecosystem that exists in the park today, with its interlocking predators and prey, its fear-driven behavioral cascades, and its recovering vegetation, is closer to what existed here before European settlement than anything that was present in the decades of the wolf's absence. The park was not complete without them. Yellowstone is protected. Its 2.2 million acres are federal land managed by the National Park Service and have been since 1872, when Ulysses Grant signed the legislation that made it the world's first national park. No hunting, no mining, no logging. The animals inside its boundaries live under the strongest legal protection available in the United States. But Yellowstone does not exist in isolation. The greater Yellowstone ecosystem, the park plus the surrounding national forests, wilderness areas, and private lands, covers roughly 22 million acres. The animals that live in Yellowstone move through this entire landscape. The grizzly bears that den in the park spend significant portions of their lives outside its boundaries. The wolves follow elk herds across park lines in winter. The mountain lions drift in and out without any awareness of legal distinctions. Outside the park boundaries, the rules change. Wolves can be hunted in Wyoming, Montana, and Idaho. Grizzly bears, when their numbers are sufficient for delisting from the Endangered Species Act, face pressure from livestock ranchers who want the right to shoot bears that attack cattle. Mountain lions are hunted legally in every surrounding state. The park is an island of protection inside a much larger landscape of conflict. Climate change adds another layer. The Yellowstone Plateau is warming faster than the global average. The whitebark pine, a keystone species for grizzly bears, is dying at an accelerating rate. Drought years, more frequent and more severe than they were a century ago, reduce the berry crops that bears depend on in fall. Rivers are warming, and with them, the cutthroat trout populations that both bears and ospreys rely on. Snowpack is declining, which changes the timing and depth of winter conditions that have shaped the behavior of every predator and prey animal in the ecosystem for thousands of years. What took millions of years to build can be disrupted on a timescale of decades. Yellowstone is not a museum piece preserved in amber. It is a living system, in motion, under pressure, responding to forces that no amount of legal protection can fully deflect. The researchers who work here know this. They watch, they measure, they document. They track individual wolves by the unique patterns of their coats and the sounds of their howls. They follow GPS-collared grizzlies through winters that are getting shorter. They count elk from ridge lines in January and wonder what the numbers will look like in January 10 years from now. They are watching one of the most important experiments in conservation history, and the outcome is not yet known. When the last tourist car leaves through the Roosevelt Arch at the park's north entrance, when the gift shops go dark and the parking lot's empty, Yellowstone becomes something different. The mountain lion, that has been sleeping in a rocky draw on the north slope of Mount Everett since midday, begins to move. It follows a ridge east, dropping occasionally to test the scent on a trail where elk passed hours earlier. Its paws make no sound on the frozen ground. Its yellow eyes collect the starlight and turn it into a clear image of the terrain ahead. In the Lamar Valley, a wolf pack is awake and moving. 7 animals spread across a half-mile of valley floor, trotting in the loose coordination that is their natural gait. Not hunting yet, just moving through the territory, marking, reading what has changed since last night. One of them pauses, nose high, sampling something on the wind. The rest pause too, watching. Then they move on. In the thermal area near Norris, a bison stands motionless at the edge of a hot spring, steam rising around it in the cold air. Its eyes are open. It is not sleeping. It is resting, conserving heat, waiting for morning. A great horned owl lifts off from a dead tree above the Madison River and glides without a sound above the frozen surface. Below the ice, cutthroat trout hold in the deep pools, barely moving, their metabolisms slowed to a minimum, waiting for spring. The supervolcano beneath everything breathes its slow breath. A geyser erupts in the darkness, nobody watching. The column of steam rising white against a sky full of stars. The sound carrying across an empty landscape. The park does not sleep. It just becomes what it is when we are not looking. If you've made it this far into Yellowstone with us, you already know this is not the kind of wildlife content you stumble across by accident. Doc Wild 4K exists for one reason: to take you inside the places most wildlife coverage barely touches. Not just the famous animals, but the systems they are part of, the pressures they face, the things that are genuinely at stake. If that is what you came here for, subscribe to Doc Wild 4K right now and hit the bell so you get notified the moment the next one drops. We go somewhere new every week, and leave us a comment with the answer to this. Which animal from today's journey do you think is the most underestimated? The coyote that reorganized the park just by existing? The mountain lion nobody ever sees? Or something else? We read everything. Until the next one, go somewhere wild. Doc Wild 4K.